Welcome to the chapter on consciousness, and we're going to elaborate on the different streams or the different types or the different forms of consciousness. And let's start off with a definition. It's an awareness of the self and our environment, right? Being hyper aware of who we are and how we fit into the world around us. Now, there are altered states of consciousness, right? Like, for example, daydreaming. That's a different form of consciousness, and you can be pulled out of it. Like, hey, wake up, or drug-induced hallucinating, or even meditating. That's a different form of consciousness. Altered states, spontaneous, for example, physiologically induced. For example, if you start doing jumping jacks, right, your heart rate starts beating faster, and you start sweating, and you've changed your consciousness to be influenced by physical activity. Or psychologically induced, like if you start thinking, you know what, I'm going to be optimistic today, and I'm going to make myself think optimistic thoughts. That's something that is induced to change your frame and your mind of consciousness. And consciousness has been described almost like a stream. It changes, right? Hence the term a stream of consciousness. It can change various forms. Now, don't confuse consciousness with the word, conscience. Hey, let your conscience be your guide. What is right and wrong. Well, that's something totally different. We are focusing on consciousness. Now, what is the place of consciousness in psychology's history? Well, in the 1880s, the whole point of psychology was an explanation of the states of consciousness. That's how it started off. But really, the first half of the 20th century was a direct observation of behavior, and then there was a focus on behaviorism, which we've talked about, classical conditioning and operant conditioning, and that was the focus. But after the 1960s, we kind of came back to contemporary psychology and focusing on consciousness. So we're going to elaborate on the different types of contemporary psychology and how it's getting us to be hyper aware and super focused. Under the influence of contemporary psychology, our consciousness has reclaimed its place as an important area of research. So let's talk about the newer forms of psychology that have brought us back to an awareness of consciousness. All right, remember, as usual, we are always focusing on what is in yellow. And here we have the definition: cognitive neuroscience, the science of the mind, cognitive psychology, and the science of the brain, neuroscience. Now, what is the difference? What does that mean, the science of the mind versus the science of the brain? Aren't they the same thing? The mind is your thinking mind, how you think and why you think. Neuroscience is the brain, the physical brain. So cognitive neuroscience, whether it's the science of the mind or how and why you think, or the science of the brain, the physical brain, that's getting us back to consciousness. Another modern psychology that has helped us to get hyper aware of consciousness is positive psychology. And instead of focusing on the sick mind and on the mind that is, ill, it's focusing on, hey, let's get the very best version of ourselves. Positive psychology, the definition it says here, explores human flourishing, getting us to be the very best version of ourselves, and thinking in a positive mind frame. For example, instead of thinking of things that you have to do, like, well, I have to take my dog for a walk, and I have to do my homework, positive psychology would have you frame your mind to think, hey, I get I get to take my dog for a walk, right? I'm lucky. Many people, they can't even own a pet because they live in an apartment complex, or maybe their parents are too strict, or I don't have to do my homework, I get to do it. Some people don't get to take college courses, or some people don't get to go to a school because they live in a very poor country. So it's framing your mind in a different form. Another form of contemporary psychology is emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence, very important, is the ability to understand, use, and manage your own emotions in a positive way. Now, emotional intelligence, or EI, is actually more important than your IQ. Many people focus on their IQ. Well, what is your IQ? Are you going to succeed in life? I don't know. What is your IQ? What is more important, actually, is your emotional intelligence. It's not who is the smartest, but who makes the smartest choices. Because sometimes the smartest person in the room may not be focused or dedicated or have the willpower to win. So many people that are very smart sometimes make poor choices in life. Uh, Emotional intelligence is also delaying gratification today in order to have a victory, to win tomorrow. So putting off, doing the fun thing today so that you can have a victory in the future. So it's making the smart choices. Emotional intelligence, very, very important. Now, one of the things that has been at the forefront of consciousness is the concept of dual processing. Information simultaneously processed on a conscious and unconscious tracks. Whether as we go through life, we're always taking in all of this information, and some of it we're very aware. We're aware of what we're processing, and some of it, it's kind of on a lower road. Perceptions, memory, attitudes, and other cognitions all operate on two levels: a conscious, deliberate high road, and an unconscious, automatic low road. Now, let me give you some examples of the two levels that are working. Have you ever thought to yourself, hey, what is the name of that song? And you're trying to remember that song, or you're thinking, where did I leave my charger? And when you try and think about it, it doesn't work. You can't remember where you left it. But let's say you get in the shower and you're taking the shower, and all of a sudden it pops in your brain. The name of the song is this and this. Or, I remember I left my charger in my backpack. Or when you're about to fall asleep, you remember something. Because sometimes what's happening is that all of the thoughts that you have in your brain, in this stream of consciousness, they're on the low road. And so when you deliberately are distracted by taking the shower, you're trying to focus on going to sleep, those thoughts and your memories you remember the name of the song, you remember where you left your charger, or you remember that thing that you wanted to do. And this is all part of dual processing. Now, because we're always having to take in so much information in the world around us, there is something called selective attention, focusing conscious awareness on a particular stimulus. And one example is a friend of mine. He would play college football. And when he was playing in college football, he would say that when they threw the football to him, he was so focused on catching the football, he actually doesn't remember being able to hear anything. His attention is so concentrated, he doesn't hear anything, and almost his peripheral vision disappears. He can't see. His peripheral vision is gone because he's so focused. his selective attention is so concentrated he can't see or hear anything that he's not focusing on. This is also called the cocktail party effect. You know, you're at a party and there's lots of people talking, but you're focusing on one individual and you're hyper aware to what they're saying. And you're drowning out the noise around you. But however, we're still doing some dual processing. So if somebody, a few feet away from you happens to say your name, you might catch that and turn your attention over there. But selective attention is how we drown out some of the world. Now, another thing to keep in mind is something called inattentional blindness. Sometimes we are so focused on something, we're a failure to see visible objects when our attention is directed somewhere else. And an example is there's an experiment of throwing a ball. So there's an experiment, there's a video where you are told, we want you to count how many times the basketball is thrown between these 5 people. So you're counting the basketball and it's thrown to different people, and you're going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You're counting the basketball being thrown to different people. And what happens is, as the basketball is being thrown, somebody walks in a gorilla costume, does a little dance, and then leaves. And then when the experiment is over, they ask, how many times was the basketball thrown? And you'll say, oh, well, 14 or 16, whatever the answer is. And then they'll ask you, did you see the person in the gorilla outfit? And most of the time people say, no, I didn't see it. That's what we call inattentional blindness. They were so focused, they didn't notice something else. There's a practical joke of a guy, and he pretends a nail is caught in his finger, and he tells his wife, please help me get this nail out of my finger, please help me. And so now she's focusing on the nail, and she's scared and she's nervous. And then the husband removes his finger because it's a fake nail, and he says, focus on getting the nail out. And with his own finger that was under the nail, he says, focused right here. She doesn't even notice that he's pulled away from the nail. And again, this is another example of inattentional blindness.